The days of Saul grew heavy. He was still king, still dressed in armor, still seated on a throne. But the Spirit of the Lord had left him. He ruled with eyes clouded by fear and hands too quick to grasp, too slow to let go. Samuel watched from afar, but he no longer rebuked, no longer warned. He had already spoken, and they had already chosen. Once, he had stood before all Israel and said, "Here I am, witness against me." Now, he stood before no one. Only the wind, the hills, and the silence of God. He remembered Saul's eyes, once filled with wonder. He remembered the oil, the trumpet, the cheers. Now, he heard only echoes, and a crown that had become a curse.
He asked for a king. I gave him one, but I could not give him a heart that obeys.
That night, Saul sat in his tent fingering the edge of his blade. The whispers had returned. The weight had not lifted, and the Lord did not answer. Far away in Ramah, Samuel lit a single lamp. He opened no scroll. He sang no psalm. He only stared at the flame and remembered a boy's voice long ago saying, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." But now the servant had spoken enough. But even in rejection, God was already preparing his next masterpiece. A king not chosen by appearance but by the heart. The Lord spoke again. "How long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go to Bethlehem." Samuel obeyed, though his heart ached. He remembered the last anointing, the shouts, the height, the hope. But now, the voice of God came with no applause, only obedience. He arrived at Jesse's house, and 7 sons stood before him. Strong, tall, and impressive. But the Lord whispered again, "Do not look at appearance or height, for the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." One son remained a boy, a shepherd. His name is David. The room fell still. Samuel's hand did not tremble. He uncorked the horn, and the oil flowed.
He is not what they expected, but neither was Moses, neither was I.
The oil glistened down David's brow, not as a crown, but as a calling. David did not shout, he did not bow. He only looked up, confused, yet still. And in that silence, heaven leaned closer. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily. As for Samuel, he only nodded once, turned and walked away. He did not explain. He did not promise glory. He only obeyed. The boy remained with sheep. The prophet returned to prayer. The days grew quiet in Ramah. Samuel no longer traveled, no longer judged, no longer spoke in the assembly. The man who once stood between kings and covenants now sat alone beneath an olive tree. His staff rested beside him. His lamp stayed lit longer than the sun. He had seen the anointing of Saul. He had seen the oil fall on David. He had seen too much, and yet his spirit was not bitter, only tired. He remembered the voice that called him long ago, not in thunder, not in flame, but in the stillness of night.
"Samuel, Samuel."
And he had answered,
"Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening."
But now there was nothing more to hear, only the wind, only the weight of knowing.
"I have walked before you from my youth until this day, and I have not defrauded, nor oppressed, nor taken a bribe. You are my witness." But Lord, they asked for a king, and I gave them one. You tore him away, and I obeyed. You chose another, and I obeyed. But now of only memory, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I will fear no evil, for you are with me.
The sun dipped low over Ramah. Birds returned to their nests. But the prophet did not move. He had no speech left. No warning, no prophecy. Just a heartbeat and a prayer. He whispered one last time, and the lamp beside him flickered one last time. It happened without warning. No storm, no angel, no crown. Samuel simply didn't rise that morning. They found him beneath the olive tree with his lamp extinguished, his staff still leaning beside him, his robe folded across his lap. No final words, no dramatic farewell, just peace. But all Israel heard. They came by hundreds, by thousands. Men who once rejected him, women who remembered his judgments, children who had only heard his name in prayer, and they wept.
The Lord has taken away the righteous, and none considereth. Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his faithful servant.
They buried him at Ramah, in the land where he had first heard God speak. And the ground seemed to hold its breath.
He never wore a crown, but he shaped kings. He never raised an army, but his prayers moved nations.
And for a time all was still, but even in death, Samuel's voice was not silenced. Years later, when Saul stood alone, when fear choked out faith, when God no longer answered, they would call him back, and the grave would not hold his voice. Because Samuel had lived not for men, but for the Word, and those who live for the Word never truly die. The final echo of Samuel's life, a life spent calling a nation back to God, thundered across eternity. The boy who heard God's whisper had become the man whose voice even death could not silence. Samuel's legacy is profound, making him one of the most important figures in the history of Israel. As a prophet, he was a mouthpiece for God, delivering messages of warning, guidance, and hope to the people. He was also a priest who ministered at the tabernacle and led Israel in religious practices. Samuel is considered the last of the judges who governed Israel before the monarchy was established. His role as judge helped keep Israel united, leading them during times of conflict. Samuel's most significant act was anointing the first two kings of Israel. He anointed Saul, who initially led the people but failed due to disobedience to God. Later, Samuel anointed David, a man after God's own heart, marking the beginning of the Davidic dynasty, which is significant in the history of Israel. Samuel's moral integrity is evident in his life. He was a man of prayer and committed to God's will. He was never called king, but kings fell at his word.
Return to the Lord with all your heart and serve him only. Then the Lord will deliver you out of the hand of your enemies.
His voice now rests, but his echo remains. So if you hear nothing else from his story, hear this: obedience is louder than ambition. Prayer is stronger than politics, and the whisper of God is greater than the shout of kings.
Speak, Lord. Your servant is listening.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of faith. If you believe these Bible stories can touch hearts, please leave a kind comment, and share this video with your loved ones. Don't forget to subscribe to Bible Adventures, where we bring God's Word to life through epic, heartfelt animations for kids and families alike. May you and your family always walk in God's blessings and peace.